Hey guys, and welcome to another fun video lesson, Unit 6 Quadratics. This is Miss Capola here, and we are going to be doing lesson 6.6, solving by factoring day 2. Now, please pay attention to this special note. Ooh, I do not like the way the red looks with this. If this is not what the top of your page 29 looks like in your packet, go to page 31 right now because this is where we're going to start, and then we will come back to page 29. So I'll give you a second to get there if you are not already there, and what we're going to do is we're going to read through this. So Kevin and Layla are two friends, and they're solving quadratic equations for fun. And so below is their work. They're supposed to be solving x squared plus 2x equals 15. So I'll give you a second to look through both of their work, and I want you to decide. One of them did the work incorrectly. Who is it? And why do you think that the work that they did was incorrect? All right, guys, so hopefully you put some thought into who you think is incorrect. And so let's just run through this. Unfortunately, Kevin is the one who did his work incorrectly, and we talked about this last class. When we are looking at solving quadratic equations, the number that you want to be on one of the sides is always equal to 0. And unfortunately, Kevin did not follow those steps. Okay, he factored the left-hand side and then set each piece equal to 0. And even though he got two answers of 15 and 13, when you actually look at the graph, which is over here, and again, we had to look at x squared plus 2x minus 15, the answers are actually 3 and negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh my God, 3 and negative 5. Whoa, I paused there because silly Layla, she messed stuff up as well. These should have been answers of 3. Okay, so they were both incorrect, but Kevin was way more incorrect. So it's very important when you're solving a quadratic equation that you remember to set it equal to 0 at the start, meaning we need everything to the left, and then we're going to have equals 0. All right, so when I look at this guy, we've got 5x squared minus 2x. He's okay because they're both on the left-hand side. I'm going to pick these guys up, and I'm going to move them to the left. When things change side of an equal sign, they also change sign. Let me say that again. When items change sides of an equal sign, they also change sign. So since both of these little guys were positive, when I picked them and moved them over to the left, they both became negative. All right. So the next thing I need to do when solving this quadratic is just combining like terms. We've done this a bunch of times. 5x squared minus 4x squared is x squared minus 2x minus 35. And that is equal to 0. It is important, guys, when you get a question that you read how they want you to solve it. Notice how it says algebraically. Ways you can solve, guys, algebraically would be pretty much factoring right now. That's all we know. We're going to learn a lot of different ways to solve quadratics algebraically, but for now, factoring is what we need to do. All right, so I've got that little guy equal to 0, and so now I'm feeling nice, safe, and sound. I can set up my little box. The x squared goes in the top. The minus 35 goes in the bottom. Because that constant is negative, I know I'm going to have a plus-minus combo. Now I have to figure out the numbers. All right, so let's see. My options to multiply to 35 are 1 and 35 or 3 and 7. Okay, since my goal is to get to negative 2x, I can combine in 3 and 7 to get to negative 2. That would be negative 7 plus positive 2. Let me just do that quick little check to make sure. Negative 7 times x is negative 7x. 2 times x is 2x. Negative 7 and 2, it works. So from here, just like what we did yesterday, we've got x minus 7 times x plus 2 is equal to 0. I'm able to set each factor equal to 0. And so, well, can't fit it over there. I'm going to add 7 to both sides, so my answers are 7 and negative 2. Okay, I will usually skip straight from here to here because I know when I change sides of the equal sign, those guys will change sign. Alrighty. So, this next guy, notice how there is no 0, but this is very similar to what we did last class. So you should know what to do with this f of x if it wants us to solve a quadratic. which is the same thing as finding x-intercepts, by the way. So what we're really doing is we're looking for these guys to be equal to 0. So once I've got it factored, I can set each factor pair equal to 0. So x is equal to -1 and x is equal to 2/3. How did I get that? In my head, I added the 2 over and then I divided both sides by 3. It's a good idea, guys, to always check your work. So your options here, guys, are you could graph this bad boy, okay, and make sure your x-intercepts are at -1 and 2/3. All right, last one. Here we go. Find the zeros of the quadratic equation below algebraically. Now, again, algebraically, and for now when we look at that, we're thinking factoring. Now this was nice that we have this little clue. It says, hey, you, factor out a GCF at the start. So let's see. I've got a 2x squared, a 10x, and a -28. I always get nervous when I have a leading coefficient that's not 1 because it makes me have to think a little more. But what's nice about this is that there's a GCF. What is it? Haha, if you said 2, you are correct. So I'm going to factor out that 2, and at the same time, since it said find the zeros, that means I got to take this guy and set him equal to 0. All right, so I'm going to take a 2 out of 2x squared. That leaves me with x squared. I'm going to take a 2 out of 10x. That leaves me with 5x. I'm going to take a 2 out of -28, and that leaves me with -14. Okay, so now guys, this is just like what we had to do in the previous day. We got to factor this guy. If I could make a suggestion, I would say pause the video and factor this on your own because you really don't need to use my brain to factor this for you. You should be able to do this with your own brain, right? So pause the video and factor it on your own and then come back to check. Hey, did you pause that video? I know you didn't, I can tell. If you did, we're proud of you for doing the work on your own. So here I have this guy factored. So it's 2x plus 7 times x minus 2. And so then the answers are x equals 7 and x equals -2, right? All right, let me check this. So what I did was, oopsies, is that this guy? Let me see him. Wrong guy. Let's keep going. All right, so I graphed him. Now, I said that my x-intercepts are 7 and -2, and you can see, guys, what I did was I actually graphed that function ahead of time just to make sure to check my work. I would always check my work. Now, when I look at the x-intercepts are -7 and +2. So I was kind of lazy. What I should have done was set each piece equal to 0, x plus 7 equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0. So therefore my solutions are x equals -7 and x equals 2. So lesson learned, guys. Always, always, always check your work before you box in or decide on that final answer. All right, we got the back of this page to go, guys. So directions say find the zeros of the quadratic algebraically, and for right now we know that that means factoring. So that means I need to get everything equal to 0. So I like the leading coefficient to be positive, which means I'm going to move the 16x over and that 35 over. Now, because it says algebraically, I can't just come up here, okay, and graph my little guy on the graphing calculator and show that that's my work. I need to show some form of factoring. So come up over here. I've got 3x squared. I've got -35. All right, now, because 3 is prime, I know I'm going to put a 3x and an x here. I would love it if you would pause the video and try to figure out the factors of 35 that I'm going to choose and where you're going to put them. So I've got my options for 35. It's either 1 and 35 or 7 and 3. Why don't you figure out where you're going to put, ooh, 7 and 3, oopsies, who said that? 7 and 5, ah! All right, so you decide who you're going to put where. Okay, so hopefully you thought this through on your own. You have a couple of options here, okay? We know that our goal is to get this little tail to get me to 16x. And so it ended up being your -7 here, x minus 7, and then the positive 5 here. Checking to make sure this works, 5 times x is positive 5x, 3 times negative 7 is negative 21. Negative 21 plus a positive 5 gives me that negative 16. If you were struggling to decide who goes where, you can always graph him and pick the nicer x-intercept. And if you notice, our nice x-intercept is at positive 7, which means x minus 7 is a factor. All right? This is the work you must show. 3x plus 5 times x minus 7 is equal to 0. And then I'm setting each factor pair equal to 0. So 3x equals negative 5, dividing both sides by 3, x equals negative 5/3. And then this one's pretty straightforward. It's x equals 7. So your quadratic equation has 2 solutions. All right. Number 5. Solve algebraically for y. Now what makes this guy a little crazier, all right, is that this guy looks a little weird, and then we've got that 16 minus y creeping over here. So it's not really any different. You want to move everything to the left, and then you want that right-hand side to be equal to 0. It's weird writing something with y. I got to clear these parentheses here. How do I do that? Oh, the distributive property, you say. I say that's a great idea. So y squared plus 5y minus 16 plus y is equal to 0. And then we get to combine like terms. And then last but not least, we would factor him. You should be able to factor this guy on your own. You do not need me to tell you how to factor it. I changed the y's to x's. So here is the factored form. And so then last but not least, you set each piece equal to 0. And so this is the only new thing, okay? The rest of this is from 6.5 where you factor and then you set each piece equal to 0, okay? So the new thing is figuring out how to set the guys equal to 0. All right, last but not least, I want to hop down on this one. All right, what is a possible equation? So the first thing I want you to know is that this is not a quadratic. This is a power of degree 3, okay? And so when we look at him, we've got our x-intercepts at 4, 0, and negative 2. So it's kind of like we're going backwards, and this was a lot like what we did the day before. So if these are our solutions, how do you go backwards? What factor created x equals negative 2 as a solution? X plus 2. What factor created 4 as a solution? X minus 4. And then that one with the 0, that's the trickiest. That guy is just plain old x. All right. So this was a relatively longer video. I apologize. There was a lot to get through. Hopefully you had fun, and I'll talk to you next class. Bye-bye.